Most weight loss plans are one size fits all, not taking into account each person's individual needs. Noom is here to change that. Noom Weight uses psychology. That's why they say losing weight starts with your brain. But it also takes into account your unique biological factors, which also affect weight loss success. The program helps you understand the science behind your eating choices and why you have cravings. Everyone's journey is different, so your daily lessons are personalized to you and your goals. One of the great things about Noom is that it's nourishing instead of restrictive. They focus on progress instead of perfection. You don't have to give up carbs, or anything for that matter. Have cravings? Food FOMO? Noom can help you lose weight while still enjoying your favorite foods. To date, Noom has helped more than 5.2 million people lose weight. Stay focused on what's important to you with Noom's psychology and biology-based approach. Sign up for your trial today at Noom.com. That's Noom.com.
Over the past 75 years, more than 10,000 chemicals have entered our food supply, but the EU allows just 300 additives. At Thrive Market, we prioritize quality, banning over 1,000 ingredients found in conventional grocery stores. Our Healthy Swap scanner helps you find better versions of your pantry essentials without the junk, dyes, or fillers, and everything is delivered right to your doorstep. So shop at a grocery store that actually cares about your health at thrivemarket.com/get-started for 30% off your first order and a free $60 gift.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. Now, you can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting just by contacting me directly at OppermanInvestigations@gmail.com. We do a live show every Friday night at Spreaker.com. You go there Friday night. It's totally free. There's a chat room. You get an email notification when I put up new content. And we play repeats there every night, too. So if you have it on your phone, you can catch all the repeats, a lot of classic shows from the past. And if you go there and look up our guest today, if you look up William Hamilton, PROMIS, Inslaw, Octopus, you'll find the first part of today's interview. We're doing a second part with William Hamilton, who's the president and founder of Inslaw.com. It was a case management software named PROMIS, PROMIS, that was stolen from him. We spent a good portion of the show last time discussing about how this product was stolen from. They had the copyright. They went to copyright attorneys. They went to the Justice Department ahead of time. It was completely ripped out from under him. And then he discovered that the software was being used in espionage and all of them, some things even more nefarious than we could even imagine. And there were many deaths and suspicious deaths and outright murders surrounding this story here. So Mr. William Hamilton, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great. Thank you so much. Welcome back to the show. Now, can you remind the audience who is William Hamilton?
Sure. I'm the founder of Inslaw Incorporated and the president of the company. And my wife and I have 6 now adult children and 17 grandchildren. And I'm the third oldest of 12 children myself.
When we left off last time, we were talking about Danny Casolaro, who was a freelance, independent reporter who was investigating the story that he was calling the Octopus. Why don't you tell us who was Danny Casolaro and how did you come into contact with him? Did he contact you or did you contact him?
A friend of mine named Terry Miller had a consulting firm that he owned that advised big corporations how to sell software and services to the federal government, because that's kind of an arcane market, you know.
Right.
There's all kinds of rules and regulations you have to master if you're going to be successful in that market. So he provided expertise to companies that wanted to enter the federal government market for software and services. And he got to know me because of the case, and he was a friend of Danny Casolaro's, and he suggested to Danny that he consider investigating the malfeasance in the government relating to Inslaw, the theft of the software. So that's how that happened. I did not know Danny until Terry Miller, whom I did know, introduced me to him.
Gotcha. Now,
and by that time, Danny had already decided to start the investigation. So.
Right. At the time when you came into contact with Danny Casolaro, were you already aware of this backdoor device being utilized with your software?
My guess is the answer is yes, but I don't have any distinct memory when that all happened anymore. I can't. I've known about it for so long that it's unclear to me when I first learned of it and how I learned of it. I just don't remember.
We all get older. Every one of us gets older. We're all going to lose a little vision, a little hearing, and a little memory, no matter what you do. I don't think there's anything you can do, you know? There's that. It's the story of, am I correct that it was Michael Riconosciuto who claims that he's the one who designed this little backdoor chip to get in there?
Yes. I mean, that's what he claims, and it's probably true.
And what causes you to think it's probably true?
My sources in U.S. intelligence confirm that he is an unusually bright guy when it comes to technology, computer software, stuff like that, and that they claim that he had an extraordinary capability to do the things he claims he did, which was why, in my opinion, he was a trusted insider with the government in doing this stuff with our software. He had the brains to know how to do some of this stuff. And my sources in U.S. intelligence say he was an extremely unusual intellect when it comes to this kind of technology. And I remember learning that when he grew up in Washington State, he was already doing stuff like this. He created a telephone system to compete with AT&T. This is like a 12-year-old kid.
Amazing.
And one of his, you might find this interesting, one of his neighbors, was about the same age as Riconosciuto, became the founder and CEO of Costco.
What?
And he just regarded Riconosciuto, like a lot of people did, as an unusually gifted person when it comes to technology.
Okay, that's fascinating. Then what would motivate Riconosciuto, if he has these kind of contacts and intelligence, and he's just a brilliant guy, he's doing all this kind of stuff, to come forward and be a whistleblower to this back door?
Because I think he didn't think it was kosher. In retrospect, you know, what happened when Inslaw started suing in federal court, that changed a lot. And I may have mentioned to you, Ed, that Division D at the CIA, I was told, it was a hot place to work, a desirable part of the CIA, until, supposedly, Inslaw began suing the Department of Justice over the theft of the software. Then that became an albatross for the people working in Division D of the CIA, because it didn't look good. And people who had wanted to be part of Division D, was a very desirable assignment, suddenly realized, I don't need this albatross, you know?
Well, then remind me, speaking of bad memories, right? Remind me, because we did speak about Division D a couple of times. I don't remember if it was on the air or off. Explain to us it came through Charles Hayes, you told me. Division D. Explain, what was Division D and what were they doing?
Division D, my understanding, comprised two types of people. Clandestine operatives, which are CIA officers who do things that we would think of as black bag jobs. They go places they're not supposed to legally go and do things they're not supposed to be able to do legally. And they often refer to those people as black bag guys. And the other group of people in Division D were NSA computer system engineers working in the CIA, in CIA's Division D, because you needed both the technical capabilities of the NSA computer engineers and the clandestine skills of the CIA clandestine officers in order to pull off what they were doing with PROMIS. Because you not only wanted to have PROMIS, but you wanted to make sure that if you were successful in getting a foreign intelligence agency to buy it and install it, that you would be able to get the data out of the computer to NSA. And that's not a straightforward proposition. What they ended up doing was creating something called the Petri chip at NSA, which was the clandestine operatives in Division D would intercept the shipment of the computers that are going to be used to operate PROMIS overseas for, let's say, an intelligence agency. And they would temporarily intercept the delivery and bring it to the CIA and remove one of the integrated circuits and replace it with the Petri chip made by NSA at a semiconductor manufacturing facility owned by NSA in the Silicon Valley of California that uses the same amount of electricity as the one they removed. It looks just like it. So unless you knew what happened, you'd never figure it out. And what it would do was automatically copy the data that are being tracked in the PROMIS intelligence application and from time to time transmit the data to a local NSA listening device, which would then relay that data to NSA headquarters through a U.S. spy satellite.
And that's in order to do real-time surveillance, not just collect data and analyze it later on.
Right.
Now, so you're saying that, just to clarify for the audience, let's say Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, he wants to order a computer, he orders it off of Amazon. Before it gets delivered to him, the CIA intercepts it, they put this chip in there, and he opens it up, the box looks brand new, they can't tell, they open up the computer, they look at it, they can't tell.
Right.
But
that's what I have been told.
But if Ed Opperman's sitting in his house here, okay, and the NSA wants to capture real-time my equipment, they need to do a black bag job into my house and get access to my equipment.
Right.
Right.
Or another way they do it is, let's say it's already an existing IBM mainframe in a foreign intelligence agency that's going to be used for, among other things, PROMIS. They would have people posing as maintenance people from the hardware manufacturer, in that case IBM, playing a routine maintenance call. But what they're doing when they get there is removing one of the integrated circuits and replacing it with a Petri chip, and unbeknownst to the customer, you know.
And you obtained most of this information from a fellow named Charles Hayes.
Well, I got some of it from him, but my understanding, Ed, is that there are a number of decent people working in these intelligence agencies who did not think what was happening in stealing the software was a good idea and was appropriate. And they started talking to me.
Right.
And sending information to me directly and indirectly.
Now, Mr. Hamilton, is it possible, because you've said this a couple of times, that it's because, well, William Hamilton's such a likable guy and we hate to see him get ripped off, or they hated the guy in the Reagan White House. I get the feeling you don't want to mention the name, but I know the name now, that they hated him so much that they didn't want him stealing this money.
I don't know the answer to that, but my guess is they didn't think stealing from anybody was a good idea.
Really?
You know? Yeah, I think that when I worked at NSA, the people I worked with were, according to my best information, pretty straightforward people. They didn't go there because they needed a job. They went there because they were patriotic and they were bright when it came to this kind of stuff, and they worked their asses off. you know? And the very unusual people. And one of them was a Navy officer who had gotten his PhD in English literature, was going to teach, be a college professor, but he got assigned before all of this happened to NSA, and it turns out he was extraordinarily good at doing what NSA does, which is extremely analytical work. And so he ended up not teaching in the university, but staying at NSA just because he enjoyed using his brain for that kind of stuff.
And a question that always comes up with me, I go to a lot of PI conventions and stuff like that. You meet a lot of ex-CIA, ex-FBI, ex-IRS, you know, all these ex-guys, DEA, Customs. But you never really meet ex-NSA. Back in the old days, you didn't at all. But now you're very little. Does the NSA have field agents who carry weapons and things like that?
If they do, I don't know about it.
Yeah, neither do I. Yeah, nobody does. But you hear about it on YouTube and on these podcasts, yeah? But in reality, you don't hear about it. Back to Michael Riconosciuto, okay? You said that he was motivated by, I guess, goodwill or good intentions or good heart to become a whistleblower. Then what do you make of these allegations, this arrest over manufacture of methamphetamine?
I think it was manufactured. The whole thing was manufactured to get rid of him.
Set up.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that. It's just like Danny Casolaro, in my opinion, did not commit suicide. The government had to get rid of him.
Okay, then let's get into that then, because we didn't talk about that at all. Why don't you tell us about the circumstances of his death and why you're convinced it was not a suicide?
Well, for one thing, he was a very positive kind of personality. And he was doing an incredible job of getting people to talk who shouldn't be talking. So he was learning a hell of a lot about an awfully highly classified operation, which was PROMIS. And it would never seem plausible to me that he would take his own life. He was too positive a person.
Is it possible?
And then I'm sorry, Ed.
Okay.
I think yesterday I may have told you this, but I think it's, in retrospect, very important. That Charles Hayes, you asked me about again, claimed to have worked as an independent contractor for the CIA's Division D for, I think, 20 years, something like that. What his formal business was buying surplus computer hardware from the U.S. government, stuff they don't need anymore and they sell at cheap price, you know, fixing up the computers and reselling them at a much higher price. And a press account at one point of Hayes says one of the computers he bought had bootleg copy of PROMIS software on it. All of that sounds plausible to me, you know.
Oh, he discovered
and he was smart enough to know what he's looking at, because he worked in this Division D as a contractor for, I thought, 20 years, a long time, whatever it was, you know. And my sources in intelligence says that was all true, that he was an unusually gifted operative for the kind of stuff he did, and working in foreign countries like Brazil and places like that for the U.S. government, I mean, you know. And so I think that when Hayes called me, it was about 2 weeks before Danny died. I may be repeating myself unintentionally, but
now, if you do, that's okay. Don't worry about repeating yourself. I'd rather you repeat yourself than leave something out.
It was about 2 weeks before Castellaro's death, and Hayes called me from Nancy, Kentucky, where he lived, And he knew that I had introduced Casolaro to Hayes as a potential intelligence source for Casolaro's investigation. And Casolaro had been using him. So Hayes says to me, if you have any influence with Casolaro, you got to use it, because he's not listening to me. He's strong-headed, and he intends to visit a sensitive, that was the adjective he used, facility in Washington, D.C. And if he goes through with that planned visit, he'll get killed. So you've got to get to him and convince him to abandon that plan. He will end up dead. And I called Casolaro and passed on that information. It was unusual for me to get that kind of information from Hayes or anybody, you know. And so I passed it on to Casolaro, not knowing whether it was true or not, of course, you know. And Casolaro confirmed he was planning to visit such a sensitive facility. He did not offer to identify the facility's exact address in D.C., and I didn't push him on it. And he did say the facility is told me, under the control of George K. Pender. And I knew from Casolaro that George K. Pender was a former senior CIA officer who Casolaro believed headed what Casolaro called the Octopus, a group of former senior U.S. and Allied intelligence operatives who undertake assignments from the U.S. intelligence primarily for their personal financial gain, often very challenging and complex assignments, and maybe questionable in terms of ethics, some of these assignments, you know.
Like the Iran-Contra cocaine smuggling would be one.
That kind of stuff,
yeah.
Or maybe a lot worse,
yeah.
like murder, you know. And but I don't really know what those assignments were, but you know, you use your imagination on what they might have been, you know. And I think I may have sent some of the stuff to you that one of the people who was storing some of the sensitive documents Casolaro was getting from sources in the government. He was storing them in a safe in his home in Winchester, Virginia, which is not too far from Martinsburg, West Virginia, where Casolaro ended up dead in his hotel room, you know. And this guy got a call from Casolaro to bring these sensitive files from his safe to Casolaro in Martinsburg because he needed them to trade for other documents from the people who were sources of his on Inslaw, including the contracting officer at the Justice Department, who were meeting Casolaro supposedly in Martinsburg. And the meeting had been set up by Major Joseph Cuellar, Army Special Forces Major. And he had supposedly just come back from Desert Storm, where he was involved in the warfare, in invasion of Iraq, I guess. He took a job in the Northern Virginia office of a private security firm. What I was told is that private security firm was at least a defense intelligence agency related entity. So it wasn't just a private security firm, it was a private security firm doing business the DIA needed them to do. And that I knew from Danny Casolaro that he showed up in Casolaro's life for the first time about 2 weeks before Casolaro died, and befriended him at a pub, that Danny would frequent near his house. And Danny had a date at that night at the pub, and I've talked to her, and she confirms all of this, that he introduced himself to Danny, and he said, what do you do? And Danny said, I'm researching a book on the Inslaw affair, described what that was all about. And he said, I know all about the Inslaw affair. Danny told me this afterwards.
Yeah.
The next morning, you know. He said, I know all about the Inslaw affair because Peter Viedniks, he was the Justice Department contracting officer on PROMIS, okay, is one of my closest friends, which, of course, we should have set off alarm bells, right?
Mm.
And because Viedniks was not just a contracting officer. In my estimation, he was probably a CIA officer posing as a contracting officer. I mean, he was trained to do contracting work, but that's not why he was involved. He was involved for his other skills, you know. And so forgot where I was headed with that. I'm sorry, Ed.
Well, that's okay. I was going to ask you, but what was Casolaro's background? Because, like you said, if I were to meet this guy and he'll say, oh, yeah, I know this guy, Vitrick, you know, right away red flags would go off in my head, and I would say, whoa, you know. What was Casolaro's background and experience to be dealing with these kind of people in his depth?
Well, he owned some sort of computer software-related company.
Right.
And that gave him some level of knowledge and comfort in this with the subject matter. But whether anybody has expertise when they start with this kind of corruption is another question, you know?
Yeah. And I'm sure even yourself, you look back 30 years ago and say, oh, my God, I was so naive, you know? But that's it's just life, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. I can tell you that having worked as a contractor before the malfeasance began for the Justice Department for a number of years, meaning through Inslaw, you know, I thought the Justice Department had its share of knuckleheads like any federal agency would, but I didn't accept the idea that there would be engagement in stealing people's property and all that kind of gross stuff.
Cutthroat and ruthless.
I did not believe. I didn't believe it. I didn't easily come to thinking that's even true. You know?
Cutthroat and ruthless. I've dealt in criminal defense cases where these feds, we're going to arrest your mother. We're going to arrest your wife. We're going to arrest your kids. Yeah, what are you going to do? And it's a 97% conviction rate in the federal court. You know, ruthless.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
you had said to me yesterday that the RCMP had investigated this under the radar.
That's right. They came. Two of their senior officers spent 5 months straight crisscrossing the United States, finding and interviewing witnesses in the Inslaw case, without liaising, as would be the normal thing, with the FBI. So the protocol evidently would be, you don't come in to the United States from Canada and start conducting a criminal investigation unless you're formally liaising with your partner, the FBI. But they didn't want to because they knew that the partner was part of the crime problem. They were in on it. So they came in without liaising with the FBI. Took some guts what they were doing, you know. And I think I may have told you this, but the first time the senior of the two officers called me, he said, can you go out to a public telephone somewhere and call me back? He said, I'm not speculating. Your government is monitoring your and your wife's emails and telephone calls. So it won't do to talk over the regular phone. And so each time he would call, I would have to go out and find a public payphone, and call him, and so that he could tell me what his questions were and what he was finding out. And to the best of my knowledge, that investigation got farther than any other investigation ever did, with these two experienced criminal investigators from the RCMP. And then all of a sudden, the government of Canada shut down the investigation. And the RCMP commissioner, that's like the FBI director, the equivalent, announced his unscheduled retirement. and the senior of these two officers that I dealt with on the phone frequently left the RCMP and went back to the police force in the capital of Canada. I can't think of the name of the capital right now, where he had worked before he was lent by that police force to the RCMP to work on this investigation. So he returned to the agency he had come from.
That's where he started,
Which meant that the two top guys that were working at the commissioner and the lead investigator were ceremoniously removed by somebody, right?
Yeah, like so many people involved in a situation. But did you ever find out what motivated, what was the impetus for the RCMP to get involved in this in the first place?
Yes, what they told me.
Okay.
It was they suspected that national security information of Canada had been stolen through the use of the back door in PROMIS. And that's why they wanted to do this investigation, which all of which is true, I think, you know?
Oh, yeah. It would seem to be. You sent me some information here. Let me pull this up real quick. About another fellow who had an untimely demise, Alan Standorf. What can you tell us about that case?
Yes. Well, the part verifiable easily is that he was found in January. Danny Casolaro died in April, I think, of 1991, after he had been working 12 months full-time on the investigation of Inslaw, and died. He was found dead in his hotel room in Martinsburg, West Virginia, where he had gone to meet with sources on Inslaw and to trade documents with them. And well, I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought again.
Well, we're talking about the fellow who was found dead, beaten to death in the back of his car at the airport.
Oh, Alan Standorf, yeah. And so Standorf in January, so a few months before Casolaro died, Standorf was found beaten to death on the floor of his own car in a public parking lot at National Airport. And he was an NSA civilian employee at NSA's Vint Hill, Virginia listening station, intercept station. And when I joined NSA out of college, it was right after, just coincidentally, after two mathematicians at NSA had defected from the United States to the Soviet Union and gave the Soviet Union all kinds of information about what NSA is doing. Their names were Martin and Mitchell, their last names. And because of this breach of security, NSA instituted, right before I joined, polygraph examinations for everybody. So you couldn't get a job without going through a lie detector examination at NSA. You wouldn't be offered a job unless you passed that, you know. And that was all a result of the two mathematicians who were allegedly gay and probably being blackmailed by the Soviet Union.
Right.
And there's no question that the newspapers carried what they disclosed to the Soviet Union, and it was the kind of stuff that should never have been disclosed to anybody, what NSA was doing. Mm-hmm. So apparently significant damage to NSA and to their ability to do their job. And it was a pretty important turning point in NSA's transformation into a much more secure facility.
So then how does that apply to Alan Standorf?
Oh, well, he was, I sent you, I think, Ed, an affidavit by someone who claims to have witnessed Castellero's meetings with Standorf, and that Standorf gave a computer printout to Castellero. And this guy who gave me the affidavit never used the word that I'm going to use now, main core, but that's what I'm pretty sure it was a computer printout from the main core database system, intelligence database system, the version of PROMIS that is used for political blackmail. And if you look at that affidavit from this guy, he talks about tracing wire transfers in whatever that computer printout is. It has in it wire transfers of money to offshore bank accounts of companies belonging to people like Peter Vidix and others. Well, that's kind of blackmail material.
Oh, that's huge. Yeah, that would be gold.
Yeah, right. That makes sure that he's an insider and he stays an insider, right? Because otherwise he's going to go to prison, you know?
Sure. Well, they take the money. They get in. They snatch that money out from under him, you know? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but it's more useful to have the money in the hands of the people they're going to blackmail, I think.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so Standorf, NSA claimed, you can verify this by Googling, claimed at the time that the government had been unable to solve the murder of Alan Standorf. That's not plausible. What I told you about those two mathematicians,
right?
That's like a 10-alarm fire when something like that happens, and they don't take chances. NSA has all the money in the world and plenty of brains, and they're not pushovers.
Right.
And the idea that one of their civilian employees is found beaten to death in his own car on the floor of the back seat, and that he has access to the main core computer printouts is enough.
Right, and that he was murdered at one location and dropped off at the airport, and his car was dumped at the airport with the body. Right, which is it's not like walking by robbery.
And it's kind of like to me it's like we want to make sure that everyone who's thinking about doing something like Standorf did realizes you're going to get killed.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right? And so we say we couldn't solve the murder probably because we did it, right?
Right.
I mean, I don't know who did it, but obviously I don't believe the NSA would throw up its hands and say, oops, somebody murdered him, we don't know who did it. You know?
Right.
That's not credible.
Well, I guess there is the potential. I guess I like your idea that they were sending out a message, you know, like Luca Brasi with the fish, you know, but possibly, you know, maybe it was a drug deal gone bad, and they don't want bad publicity against the NSA, so they said, well, you know, let it go away, you know. Possible?
Yeah, and that's all possible.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But
I like the Luca Brasi. Okay.
What I was told by intelligence sources at the time is that Major Cuellar was sent in to find every copy of the main core computer printouts because that stuff should never see the light of day. The reason for it, evidently, is it's indefensible. Political blackmail of members of Congress and their staff. How the hell do you even say that's okay, right? Yeah. You can't. And that's why I'm confident, even though I never got a chance to confirm it because Admiral Murphy died about 2 weeks after this all started with me.
What was the cause of his death, Admiral Murphy?
It was a stomach aneurysm.
Oh boy. Okay.
And is that a CIA induced? Who the hell knows? Right?
But as of this recording, you're feeling pretty healthy, right? You're feeling okay? I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah, well,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right,
I don't want 2 weeks to roll around and one of us is missing.
Yeah.
And what about, I heard some other murders too, possibly related to the reconnaissance end of things in Cabazon?
Well, my understanding, and I think it's probably true, is that reconnaissance is in a position to be very damaging to the government because he was not just an insider, but he was the brains insider. And when they were doing this bad stuff about our software, and he is fully capable of explaining himself. You know?
Yeah, it looks like he's still alive too. Is he doing any kind of interviews or anything?
Well, he is still alive, and I talk to him from time to time, not very often, but he's, I think, very vulnerable because he knows too damn much.
Yeah.
And they know he knows too damn much. And so he has to be very careful.
I got you. Okay, we were talking off the air, and we were talking about the corruption. I says, hey, Mr. Hamilton, is one party more corrupt than the other? And what do you make of that?
No, I think, at least as far as I could tell, they both took advantage of opportunities to have friends make money on our software. I think I may have told you that the story of Senator Sarbanes of Maryland, a senior U.S. senator at the time, who had been very vocal in supporting getting to the bottom of Watergate when Watergate took place as a U.S. senator, and very effective, smart guy, very bright guy. And someone introduced my wife to him, and I was out attending a deposition of a federal judge in our case, and in San Francisco, so I couldn't be there. My wife went, and she did her homework and learned what he had done on Watergate and wrote him a letter showing that she understood what he had done. Was quite impressive, And of course, like a politician, he appreciated that someone did their homework, right?
Yeah.
It was all true. And so it probably motivated him a little bit more to be helpful. And he contacted the Senate Judiciary Committee's chief investigator, an African-American lawyer named Ronald LeGrand, and sent LeGrand down to see my wife and me at Inflaw. Wanted to know what we think happened. We told him what we thought happened, which was stealing the software and selling it for the personal financial gain of friends of the administration. And he said, well, I have a source completely trustworthy for 20 years. I think he said something like 20 years in the criminal division of the Justice Department who has a title. And I'm going to go talk to him, and I'll get back to you. So he did, and he came back to see us again, and he said, my friend asked me to tell you the following things. What you think happened did happen. You're not crazy. Only you don't know squat about how dirty the Inflaw case really is. And if you ever learn even half of it, you will be sickened. It's a lot dirtier for the Department of Justice in its breadth and depth than Watergate was. Remember, he was in the criminal division at the time of Watergate. And he said the Department of Justice has been compromised on the Inflaw case at every level. And so Elliot Richardson then sent a letter to, which I think I shared with you, to the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Joseph Biden, and recounted what his chief investigator had already told Nancy and me and Elliot Richardson. And maybe one or two of our other lawyers. I can't remember anymore. And he gets a reply back, not from the person he sent it to, not from Chairman Biden, but supposedly from Legrand. And Legrand immediately told Nancy and me, I did not draft that reply, and my signature was forged. It was drafted by an aide to Biden, and my signature was forged by the same aide to Biden.
Incredible.
And yeah, and so what Richardson had said, we need to bring Legrand, your chief investigator, and his secret source before a duly constituted body to be interrogated under oath. We don't know if what they're saying is true or not, but it's too darn important to ignore. Got to get to the bottom of this. We're talking about corruption permeating the government, you know? And to give you an example, one of the things that Legrand told us was that his source heard Miles Matthews, whose job title was executive officer at the criminal division, come out of a meeting with the head of the criminal division at that time, an assistant attorney general named D. Lowell Jensen, the guy whose deposition I was attending in San Francisco. And Legrand, just lost my train of thought again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You know what? We talked about Legrand yesterday, so I'm not so.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we pretty much covered Legrand. We were discussing too that if the purpose of this back door was to compile blackmail material, the name Robert Maxwell comes up in this story. The father of Ghislaine Maxwell, who was the mistress and procurer for Jeffrey Epstein. What was Robert Maxwell's role in all of this?
Well, I meant to send you today. I don't know if I've succeeded or not.
You did.
Oh, okay. Somebody in the Justice Department sent word to me that the Justice Department had documentation on 15 million sales of PROMIS in New Mexico. And this would all, of course, be illegal sales, you know, unauthorized copyright infringing copies of PROMIS. And so I did a Freedom of Information Act request for the documents, and I got them, and it doesn't, most of it is blocked out, you know, for national security reasons. But enough of it is you can read between the lines. And it was a counterintelligence investigation prompted by two technology transfer employees of the Sandia National Laboratory, one of the two national nuclear warfare labs in New Mexico was Sandia, and the other was Los Alamos. So when we talk about those two labs, those are the labs we're talking about. The two main U.S. nuclear warfare labs, and they're both headquartered in New Mexico, Sandia and Los Alamos. And and it turns out, reading the part that's still readable, the FBI, the two Sandia engineers, technology transfer engineers, had gone to a local FBI office in New Mexico to raise concern that a foreign national, meaning Robert Maxwell, was allowed to be involved in something as sensitive as the PROMIS software. And that's very plausible sounding to me. You know, you don't do that with foreign nationals, you know,
especially with his reputation. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the FBI headquarters then evidently, you have to read between the lines, ordered the local field office in New Mexico to shut down the counterintelligence investigation it had started, and to tell the NSA colleagues who had been cooperating with the Sandia engineers on trying to get to the bottom of this, if you don't like that decision, take it up with FBI headquarters. In other words, the field office is out of the picture. We're ordering them to be out of the picture.
Wow.
What that tells me is the whole idea was an approved covert intelligence operation, approved at a very high level of the U.S. government, and the FBI headquarters is reflecting that. That's my guess. What that means,
Yeah. Also, kind of shows that Maxwell had the kind of juice that they're not going to throw me to the wolves and poo-poo me and move me away. They're going to take out high-ranking FBI field office supervisors.
Right.
We were talking about. By the way, too, we're almost out of time, so I'm hoping we can do another hour in the future. I'll email you after the show. Thank you.
Okay.
No, this is great stuff, man. This is great stuff. We were talking about all these people that have these unfortunate accidents about 2 weeks after they get involved with the art. Now, what about yourself? Anything like where you caught yourself and says, "Hey, I'm walking into a deadly trap," or maybe there was an attempt or some kind of serious threat to your life?
Oh, well, it was an investment banker in Canada who was the complaining witness for the investigation of the Intel affair up there. And the RCMP would share information. He's a Canadian citizen, obviously, with him. And one of the things they shared with him is that they had intercepted a conversation at a meeting at a Montreal hotel between Rafi Eitan, that's a name you probably have heard of, right?
Yes.
And Rafi Eitan and Eri Ben Menashe.
Okay.
He's a former Israeli intelligence officer who lives in Montreal. And at the meeting, Rafi Eitan, and according to what the RCMP officer told this investment banker, who was his regular contact, the complaining witness and all this shit, he said, "Don't tell Bill Hamilton this because they'll just worry him." But he said we intercepted their conversation and they were planning the assassination of Hamilton and his wife, and in their home. And around the same time, source at the CIA, not knowing what I just told you, told me, "Don't take any long drives in the countryside for a while. Your lives are in danger." And told me that Rafi Eitan had flown on a unmarked C-130 from Frankfurt, Germany, along with a delegation of Israeli intelligence, and went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, for a conference on the use of the PROMIS software in the war in the Balkans. And that his plane stopped in Washington so that he could have a meeting and obtain concurrence from the U.S. government for the assassination, and I don't want to put this out, okay, of my wife and me. So that's two sources if you're catching on to that,
Yeah.
One is the RCMP intercepting that conversation I told you about, and the other is CIA telling me.
And Eri Ben Menashe also.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Ben Menashe never told that directly to me.
Right.
I'm sure he realizes that his credibility with me is zero, since he was actively involved with Rafi Eitan in planning assassination of us,
Right. And then you sent me over an affidavit from Gordon Thomas concerning the Rafi Eitan confession and admission, not to this assassination attempt, but to the back door in the software. Bragging.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I may have told you this, but I thought those two affidavits from Rafi Eitan, from
Gordon Thomas,
were terrific. And I wrote, in order to head off the possibility of someone trying to diminish their authenticity, I wrote a lengthy INSLAW evidentiary memorandum once I got those two affidavits, 44 pages in length, of other evidence INSLAW had acquired that was corroborative of significant elements of what Gordon Thomas says Rafi Eitan told him about PROMIS, so that any reasonable person would think twice about just laughing it off. You know, there's too much evidence, right?
Gotcha.
And then I got a friend of my wife and mine, who was also a friend of the CIA director, to get the CIA director, George Tenet, to read the 2 affidavits from Gordon Thomas and my 44-page evidentiary memorandum of corroborative evidence. And Tenet read it and then telephoned the mutual friend and said, if the Insull memorandum is accurate, what the government has done to the Hamilton family is unconscionable, and the case needs to be settled. I don't understand, frankly, why Attorney General Ashcroft, who is then the Attorney General, is not moving on behalf of the government as a whole to settle the Insull case. But if necessary, I'm prepared to settle the CIA's part. Mm-hmm. And toward that end, I have ordered the CIA General Counsel to report to me on Wednesday of next week on whether, as a matter of law, the CIA is liable for the payment of consequential damages to Insull. That's a term of art in damages. And it would be like lost profits and stuff.
Right.
And the so
then Tenet came back and they backed off, and they rescinded that offer.
When Wednesday came, when Wednesday called, they called the mutual friend again, and he said the CIA General Counsel has advised me not to get involved in the Insull case. And of course, the General Counsel works for the CIA director, not the other way around, you know. And so nothing made a lot of sense. And at that point, I telephoned Admiral Murphy, Daniel Murphy, whom I had met through Elliot Richardson, who had by that time passed away. And Admiral Murphy had been deputy director of the CIA in the Ford administration, chief of staff to Vice President Bush in the first term of the Reagan administration, Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence in the Carter administration, and Commander-in-Chief of the Sixth Fleet in the Mediterranean during the Israeli-Arab War. So, a pretty impressive character, and with a lot of intelligence assignments at a high level. And I said, Dan, do you have any insight into why the CIA director would do such an abrupt about-face? Which I explained to him, you know. Yeah. And he said, it's my hunch, Bill, that there's another use of your software that you haven't discovered yet, that it involves something so seriously wrong that money alone cannot cure the problem, and that unless and until Insull discovers that additional use of PROMIS, the government may never compensate your company. He said, I'm confident you'll figure it out. And then within 2 weeks, he dropped dead. And before he dropped dead, he called me and said he had already introduced us to Boyd and Gray had already agreed to serve as our lawyer. And he said, I forgot where I was headed with that too.
Well, then I think it became apparent that it was being used for blackmail purposes to gain compromise information on members of Congress in order to basically
get your will.
Yeah, make the
get things to turn out. It's like a dictatorship when you do that kind of shit.
Three branches of government are basically disrupted. Mr. Bill Hamilton, we are out of time, though. We're out of time. I'm going to email you after the show and see if we can arrange something for tomorrow to fill in some of these blanks, but this is great information. I can't thank you enough, sir.
Okay. Nice talking to you.
You too, sir. Thank you. Bye.